Everything we're going to see right now in the Gemara, we're going to see in the Rambam and relevant halachas afterwards, because we have to cover Rambam also. Amar Rava, Ha Miltha, Amritha Ana. This matter, I myself had said it. We Tamra Mishmei de Rabbi Zera Kawathi. And it was said in the name of Rabbi Zera, also like I say. Shlosha she'achalu ke'achaf. Let's say 3 eat together, bread. Echad mafsik l'shnayim, mein shtayim mafsikim le'echad. 1 stops for the 2, but 2 do not interrupt for the 1. What do we mean by interrupting? Let's see what Rashi says. We'll see what the Rambam says also. Echad mafsik l'shnayim, according to Rashi, im gamru hashnayim sudatan. If 2 finished eating, rotzin l'zamein, and now they say, well, we need a Zimmun here. Now, the third guy is just going on. He keeps eating, but we got to go somewhere already. But we have a rabbinic obligation to have what's called a Zimmun. Zimmun would be an invitation now to bless God together. New halachic category. So what does he say? Derech eretzu she'eh echad mafsik et surato ad sheyizamnu alav ad birkat hazan. It's derech eretz that this other one stop eating, that the other 2 have their zimun, their official invitation to say the grace, to thank God, and he waits for them to at least finish the first of the blessings of Birkat Hamazon. Okay, Hazanat HaKol. And then he continued. The Hainu Birkat Zimun, V'chozer v'gomer sudato, and then he can continue eating. Aval shnayim ein alehem lafsik b'shvil hayachid v'yamtin ad she'yigemeru. If it's 2 are still eating, now you have 1 person, he's got to go. He cannot halachically compel the others to stop for a minute, we'll say a zimun, and then the 2 will continue eating afterwards. You're going to see, perhaps there's a slightly different way to understand this halacha. Well, no, we can't leave. We're stuck with them. So what are you going to do? Wait a minute, I don't want to get stuck. I know I'm going to have to eat my bread. And these other 2, they have about 2 hours. They're at a business meeting, and I have a 5-minute break to eat my sandwich. So what should I do? The answer is, not join them. Okay, mirosh means from the outset. So make a stipulation. Don't break bread together. Remember, one of the things that shows that 3 eat together is that they start together. Right? Avoid them. Don't sit at the same table. You got to go. What is this? This is the usual trick. I don't like staying long at weddings, especially night weddings. People expect that you're going to stay up extra late one night. You think you'll be able to get up to the minyan the next morning, still have a life to live. So last night I went to a wedding, and I specifically just left after the chuppah. I noticed rabbi types do that. They don't stick around. So what do we used to have to do? You go to some sort of wedding after the chuppah, there'll probably be an hour break before anything happens. They'll sit at a table, maybe, or just don't eat the bread. Don't start eating bread at that point. Or have an explicit stipulation you're not going to be eating with anybody. That way you don't get stuck with anybody. Yeah, it's kind of difficult. But the whole point of having a wedding meal is that not only you're joining with 3 people, you're joining with the whole group. It's 10 men at least, and you're going to say special blessings. They're going to be Sheva Brachas. If it's a wedding meal, you have the Sheva Brachas aside from the minyan, and you have a kos. So you don't get to participate in any of that if you do not actually join the meal. So Chachamein of Barosho. Decide what you're doing beforehand. Yeah. I don't think so. I hope not.
No, because I know the wedding last night.
Yeah, where the groom's father was an uncle.
Yeah.
Even if I did say it, I would not give away anything right online of where I was last night. So there you
go. Okay. I have no idea where it was. I know there was a Hatuna of somebody who got it with us. He started 5 minutes after everyone else.
Yeah, you could if he sits at the table and that's his express intent, and the intent was beforehand, and they eat together, they're sharing bread. There's a lot that goes into it. I would think that, let's say if it was a Shabbos meal, the only thing he loses is lechem mishneh, because they broke bread without him. Yeah, okay. Below, and they ask, wait a minute, is this so? Rav Papa ifsik la'aba mar berei. Ihu v'chad. Rav Papa stopped for Mar Berei, and he was with someone else. And So why did Rav Papa do this? He said, let's make the two stop for the one. Shiny Rav Papa delifnim yishurat adin hu de'avad. And Rav Papa is different because he acted within the letter of the law. Okay? We don't necessarily do like Rav Papa. Rav Papa was different than the rest of us in a good way. Yehuda bar Mimrei Mar, Umar bar Rav Ashay, Rav Acha midifti. How many we got here? One, and Rav Ashi's son, Yehuda bar Mimrei Mar, Rav Ashi's son, and Rav Acha from Difti. Krachi Rifta Bahadi Hadadi. They were breaking bread together. Interestingly enough, don't use the regular word here, bitziyah, which usually means break bread. And here it means they were sandwiching. Okay? They were making sandwiches with bread. They have the shorish there, kaf, reish kaf. Lo hava behu chad, lo hava muflag mechavreng. There was not among them one who was more outstanding than the others. Yes, they're all equally outstanding. Rashi says, muflag b'chokhmah uvzikna min hashnayim. Okay, or min hashanim, in this case. So no one was exceptional among them. No one was older. Yes, they're all the same age. Levaruche lehu, in order to say the blessing for them. So who do they give the privilege among the three? Yad ve'kamu bailehu. They asked, when the sages told us in the Mishnah that three who eat together are obligated to then invite each other to say the grace, Hani milei, that's said when, Hecha diika adam gadol, when we have someone who is great, a great man, or as Rashi says, Shagadol mivarech kidefaskina lekaman hilchata. You should have the greater one say the blessing for everybody. What do we do here? Everybody's equals. But here, if everybody is, like I said, peers, no one is outstanding, Chaluk brachot adif, maybe it would be best, and this is the principle that we were asking about before, Chaluk brachot adif, or chiluk brachot, chiluk brachot. What does that mean? Everybody's saying his own blessings. It means we'll have more blessings being said. That's the idea behind, by the way, two people blessing together. Chiluk brachot adif. Everybody says blessings. Perhaps for many things, even though Rovam Hadras Melech, in regards to, let's say, I don't know, there's quite a few that we would say that it's better if everybody's reciting his own blessing. Okay, so what's the answer? Anybody want to offer it? But they said, Baruch Inish L'Nafshei. So each one said his own blessing. Each man, every man for himself. Atu L'Kamei Dim Ramemar. So they came to Meremar, that's Yehuda bar Meremar's father. So he was older than them. Amar Luhu Yedei Bracha Yitzatem. Concerning your obligation to say the blessings, you discharged your obligations. Yedei Zimmun lo Yitzatem. But with regards to your obligation to have a Zimmun and invite each other to do it together, you did not discharge your obligation. So let's say you will say, you know what? So let's have some sort of zimun, a retroactive zimun for the grace we have already said. Ein zimun lemafreya. That doesn't work. No such thing as retroactive invitation to say the grace. I'm trying to avoid saying Yiddishisms like bench and make a bracha because it doesn't really work in English so well. It's bad enough we're learning in English and not entirely in Hebrew. But then again, did the sages have akpada? Did they really care? Everything has to be strictly in Hebrew? No. How do I know that? Because we're reading a Talmud that's written in Aramaic. Okay? So, and Kaddish also. Kaddish used to be said in Hebrew here, that's true. Yeah. Well, what was that?
FYI, my son-in-law has a seminary, and some of the girls on Friday, you say thank you, have no idea.
Really, where's the seminary? Well, I'm sure it's a nice place, but he does not get any originality points for a name like that. I'll talk to you more about that after. Okay, so much like prevention also does not work retroactively. So if you, let's say, to prevent a war or prevent terrorism and things like that, taking steps afterwards doesn't really help. Okay, there's a times a Okay. Yeah. Oh. Yep. Here's a good question. This comes up. People should know this one because it's not written in the benchers what to do, but people should know it. Does happen. Ba umtsa'an. Let's say Rashi says echad min ashuk. Someone came off the street. Ba umatzah shlosha shahu mizamnim. He walks in and there's a zimun happening. Really? Kishahin mevarchin mahu omer achreihem. So when they're saying this blessing, what does he say? He shouldn't just be quiet. They're assuming he should say something. Rashi says, "The lo matzei lememar shachlu mishalo, she'achanu mishalo." He can't say Baruch she'achanu mishalo tzvochayinu because he didn't eat just now. So we should say something. Rav Zavid Amar Baruch Vorach. He just says Baruch Vorach. Shulchan Aruch has it slightly differently. You'll see that. Rav Papa Amar Oneh Amen. That's what I would have said. Just say Amen. Amen. It's like the catch-all response. Velo pligi. Rav Zavid and Rav Papa are not really arguing the same point here. Ha da ashkechinu the kamri nevarech. Here's where he walked in. He heard the part nevarech shachan mishalo. The ha da ashkechinu the kamri baruch shachan mishalo tzvochayinu. The next two lines. Now, split second difference here. So it depends when he walked in what he heard. Ashkechinu the kamri nevarech. If he heard the fellow say, okay, let us say the grace, then this new guy's response is, Omer Baruchum Vorach. He says, blessed, okay, what's the difference between Baruchum Vorach, by the way? That's a good question. Baruch is a standard, it's not a verb. It is an adjective, meaning blessed in English. Mivorach means it's actually the pual form of a verb. Okay, it means a mivorach means there has to first be a mivarech. Mivorach is the passive of the mivarech. Mivarech is one who blesses. In English, it's almost lost. What's the difference between blessed and blessed? Similar to a lot of cases where we have a nifal and also an adjectival form in Hebrew, like you have shavur and nishbar. Okay, shavur means something is broken, happens to be broken right now. It's an adjective. Nishbar with a kamatz means it's being broken right now. Okay? It's a verb. It's a passive verb. Okay, so here's the verb form and the adjectival form of blessed. Ashkechinu deka amrei baruch oneh amen. But if he has him saying baruch she'acham mishalo tzvochayinu, then he says amen. As Rashi says, kida ashkechinu deka amar amzamein nevarech v'ashkechinu da'anu baruch hu oneh batraihu amen. This I was discussing with some younger folks. Really, the assumption here and in the Shulchan Aruch and the codes until recently was, how does the Zimmun work? One fellow says, Nevarech she'achanu mishalo. Everybody responds, Baruch she'achanu mishalo tzvochinu. That's the minion, we invoke God's name. And then the original Mizamein repeats that line. How many lines total? 3. The Mizamein, the assembled, and the Mizamein. But that's not what it says in my bencher. What does it have in my bencher? Yeah. It says, Rabotai nevarech, Yehi Shem Hashem nevarach, me'atav yad olam. Where does that come from? That's a later Kabbalistic minhag. Sort of like a warning to people, we're about to say the Zimmun. Okay? It's a pre-Zimmun Zimmun. And then sometimes there's asking, taking, permission from the assembled. Say Berachot, and then you start honoring all the various people. If someone who's older than there, maybe it's the Kohen who's declined to say the grace, someone else. You have to address everybody. And I found in the Sephardic venture it has slightly different until you finally get to that word, nivarech. So those people notice I had some youngsters around. They're very much sticklers, doing things exactly like the Torah. So they had a Zimmun at my house, and one of the young men was given the honor to say the bracha, a cup of wine. He said, Nevarech she'achanu mishalo, or just Nevarech. So some say, Nevarech, that's it. And everybody's son, Baruch she'achanu mishalo. So I knew what was going on, but it really confused my wife and my daughter. What's going on here? And the answer is, he was doing exactly as halacha says, but they never saw this or heard this before. So sometimes you have someone who just does exactly as it's written. I remember there's a story about Rabbi Soloveitchik. The way he said Birkas Levana confuse someone because he didn't know. Oh, that's the way you do it. Yeah, that's what it says exactly. Rav Shechter says Rabbi Soloveitchik, they thought he used to do things differently, but then they just open up the books and say, oh, this is exactly what the Rambam says. Most people just didn't get it, or this is exactly what you find in the Shulchan Aruch. You just don't get it. So most don't know that this is the stage. If you walk in at the part where they say Rabbi Chaim Nevarech or Rabbi Isai Mirvel invention, like they used to say, right? Because everybody speaks Yiddish. So what do you respond at that point? You could say Yishem Hashem Varach Me'achav, which is the pasuk. That's a valid response even for people who do not eat. When they get to the Varech part, you're supposed to say Baruch and Varach and Amen at the last part. Okay. Questions? Now everybody, has anybody ever invoked this yet? Good. Now you know what to do. Okay? If they grabbed you off the street to help make a minyan of the Shefa brachas, this should be a response. What about the various piyutim that they say? Devaya Ser V'Gam Charon. Okay? Or there's other piyutim that they say. There's a bris piyutim and there's the Simcha B'Mono. That's actually something you're supposed to say. Simcha B'Mono is halachic. Think that which is said, no de l'shimcha b'soch emunai, that they say at the bris, for example, that's just a piyut. That does not have halachic standing. Similarly, people think that there's Sheva brachas, that's an actual mitzvah. You have a wedding meal or post-wedding meal, even for 7 days, these 7 blessings are recited. Now, we're very lenient with regards to the permission to say that. You have to have new people around, right? We call a new face, panim chadashos. So we're a little bit very lenient with that standard. But be that as it may, Sheva brachas is actually something in the halacha. Let's say those various prayers they say for the Rachanimo and the Sandik and the Moel, like they say at the bris, towards the end, that's nothing. There's nothing bad about that, but that's not a halachically recognized recital.
Most people don't know that on the bris, one Kohen should say that it should be said by.
It should be said by a Kohen? I don't know. Should it be said? That's my question. Okay. There are people, the Grunics especially, they shy away from any liturgy that was not instituted by the sages, not strictly there. So each his own. That's why, have you met a scholar who doesn't say anything after Yechasreinu? We'll see more about that. Yeah. You learn things by just watching who does what. Tani Chada, Honeh Amein Achar Birchotav, Hareze Mishubach. Tanya Idach, Hareze Miguneh. Who says Amein after his own blessings? They say it. Smart, and they do. Every time they say Shakol Yebivaro Amein. Oh. So let's see what the Gemara says. Okay, so they say that we'll see who says what. There's actually, I think we're going to see quite a few opinions on this matter. There's no Echreya, but the Vilna Gaon certainly has a surprise there for us. Although I think it's cute, 2-year-olds when they teach them say brachas, for some reason they say amen. My son was, tell him say a shakal on this drink, and he would say amen to it. On the tilat yadayim, amen. He does it to himself. Okay, that's okay. You just have to teach a child not to do that. But the good part is they're saying the blessing. My daughter famously, on a chocolate chip, to incentivize her in her toilet training, was given a chocolate chip. So my wife asked her, so what's the bracha? Al chocolate chip. Okay? Wow. Okay. Who'd have known that was the bracha? Yeah. Yeah, you can see the children have the right intentions. So what is the rule here? One who says amen after his own blessings is Meguneh or Mishubach. Certainly anybody who hears any blessing responds amen, as long as it's said by a believer. Okay? Really, you have a problem if you have some sort of heretic saying things. It's not so clear they have the right intentions. What does amen mean? By the way, amen is more than just an affirmative. Okay? Well, I don't think it's Russian. I think that's not what the word means. Well, okay, it is from the Shorish Emunah. Amen in this case is not only just agreeing with what was said, he is affirming what it says. It's an affirmation and an agreement. Okay, affirmation and an agreement and a statement that that which has been said is true. Okay, that's amen. is a state of form. Like Samein Ra'ev, unfortunately, those that mean thirsty and hungry, but there are better ones. Okay? Like Shamein means corpulent. Okay? It's a state of form. It is a type of verb. Really, it should have a cholam there. But stative verbs, instead of cholam, they have a kamatz. Okay? Amein itself has a past tense and a future tense also. Okay? And it's not necessarily about belief, but it's a type of thing that is believable. So the sages instituted that this be said. Okay? It's already, we find a few places in Torah where people said this as sort of an affirmation of what was said. Okay. Here's the kasha. Ha b'vonei Rishlaim, ha b'shar brachot. When should one say amen after his own blessing? Bonei Yerushalayim. Wait a minute. When did we say Bonei Yerushalayim? I know of two Bonei Yerushalayim that are generally said. One is in the grace after the meal, and what did you say? Shemona Esrei. Now, you say, no, that really doesn't make any sense. Even in Shemona Esrei, Shemona Esrei, there's no real reason to say amen there. So let's see what Rashi says. Shahaya sof abrachot, hareza mishubach. Lechem besof birkot kriyat shma, shacharit varvit, v'achar kol birchotav. Okay? Rashi is basically telling you, is Rashi, he's a proto-Ashkenazic. He didn't even live in Germany. He lived in France. Basically, beginning of that tradition, he says, after, let's say, all the brachas of Kriyat Shema, morning and night, and after all his blessings, the Katani Bevraisa, Hareza Meshubach, Achar Gamar Kol Birchotav Kamar. Once one has finished a whole series of blessings, that's when he says Amen. V'achar Kol Birchotav the Katani Hareza Meguneh, Besof Kol Bracha Uvracha Kamar. Every specific blessing. What does Rashi do with this Bonei Yerushalayim? Bonei Yerushalayim is an example of such a case. Okay? Bonei Yerushalayim would be the example. That's the end of a series of blessings. How many blessings so far? 3 blessings. So then he says Amen. Rashi is very liberal with this Amen. Do people really follow Rashi? Generally not. Well, not exactly. We're going to see. There are more opinions. Okay? The Spartan, let's say, Rashi would maybe say that over here, we'll see this inside, let's say after Yishtabach, there's no Amen according to Rashi. That's just one bracha on its own. Okay? Rashi says, Kol bracha, no. But at the end of a series of brachas, yes. So you have to have a series. Yishtabach might not be considered a series. Okay? It's the end of a series. So, no, I don't know. I wouldn't call the Vilna Gaon a smarty. Yeah. We'll see soon. No. Abaye Anila Dekala. Abaye answered out loud, Hihechi Dilishma'u Poalim, that the workers would hear. Where was Abaye doing this? Abaye was maybe walking where he saw people doing farm work. Why did he do this? Yedu shed nigmara kol bracha sharei ein mavarech oneh amen elav l'rasof. Abaye said after Bonei Yerushalayim, he said the grace for everybody, and then he said amen after his own bracha. Why did Abaye do this? That the workers, who were not as educated as he was, would understand that this is the end. V'leikumu da'tov abitiv lavdo raisa. And therefore, by doing so, he would be teaching them that Hatov Abitiv, that last blessing of the grace, is not biblically mandated. And Rashi continues, La Vitayu. It's not biblically commanded to actually say this blessing. V'imishum yikam afka l'hul yatov abitiv lo ichpatle. If he's worried that maybe they'll think that, oh, now Hatov Abitiv doesn't even have to be said. Abaye said Amen after Bonei Yerushalayim is even saying this blessing. We don't really worry about that. The Kasavar, the Lavdo Raisahi, Ella Biyavne Tiknua, Al Haruge Bitar Shnitlu L'Chafura. And so, because this was an addition, Abaye was just trying to show them, here's where it ends. This is similar to the rabbi we know when he was saying the grace in front of the students, stopped at Yichasreinu. When Abaye says Amen at Bonei Yerushalayim, he's teaching them Hatov Amitiv is now an addition that the sages instituted. And if he stops at Yichasreinu and then smiles and continues talking, so he's basically telling everybody that everything after Yichasreinu doesn't count. Now there are things he said. There is perhaps even a problem with saying certain things on Shabbos. So find an older version of the grace, and you'll see that they used to have a lot less to say after Yechasreinu. However, there's one thing that still is obligatory, and we'll see that shortly. Rav Ashi, Anile, there's a yud here that should not be, so I'm erasing it. Anile Bilchisha. Rav Ashi said it quietly, this bracha after Bonei Yerushalayim. Why did he do that? He took a different consideration of Abaye. He didn't want the Pauline, those who were not so learned, to maybe understand that if he said Amen at this point, Hatov Amitiv should not be said at all. Maybe he says Amen now, and then it's just perhaps they think that's the end. But they should be saying this extra blessing that the sages instituted. Rashi says, Lahahu Amen Bilchisha, Yehi Delo Lishmeu V'Yedu Shesham Gemar HaBerachot. He didn't want them to become too wise. He said Amen after Bonei Yerushalayim, then they would think, oh, nothing more. We Zalzulu Katov Ametiv. And they'll start looking down on this blessing. But however, it was the end of all his blessings, was the official end. The Tanya B'Vraisa raised Meshubach lo sagila lo anile. It wouldn't have been good enough for him to just be quiet and not say anything. He had to say something, so he said it bilchisha. Very interesting. You have something that you have to watch out. When there's a fine line between wanting to make a point, or so that the children will ask, or so the balabatim will understand, and maybe them getting the wrong impression about something. Very, very difficult sometimes. But I used to like it. It was I learned from Rabbi about their priorities, watching what they're doing, what they considered important, what they didn't. I remember years ago, this must have been now almost 15 years ago, Rabbi Rabinovich's son, the current Rabbi Rabinovich, Rabbi Rabinovich, blessed memory's son, came into shul on the morning of Simchas Torah. You say. Yeah. So now he's a little bit bigger. He stopped them from davening. Basically said, you got to finish the davening now, and everybody's got to go home and have kiddush. He didn't have a kiddush, and davening's running a little bit late. He was very makpid on the halacha. You can't go until chatzos on a Shabbos or Yontif. This, by the way, is both. It was Shabbos Yontif. He told them, you got to stop, finish up, go home and say kiddush. None of the extra stuff. Put the Sifrei Torah away, no more akafas, anything. Musaf, if best you can, also what you cut out. Understand, you don't have to say the piyutim of Geshem. That's just piyutim. The important part is you tell people, Mashi Baruch Amida Geshem. Okay? Nothing extra. Kaddish Tiskabel and go home. Oh, Rabbi, what about Aleinu? Shir Shal Yom? Shir HaKavod? Kaddish Tiskabel and go home. So what do we learn from this? A few halachas that you're not supposed to be fasting. You have to say Kiddush by a certain time to start your meal on Shabbos and Yom. And also, really, Ikar Adin, Kaddish Tiskabel, go home. Who, by the way, says it like that? The Rambam. Okay? And when do we actually do that? According to, let's say, Minhag Archko, which is the Minhag that we received from Sinai. Okay? So what does it say? The only day of the year where there's Musaf is followed by a Kaddish, Tiskabel, and that's it. Go home or whatever. Something else. Where do we have this? What? Yom Kippur. Really, it's not that Yom Kippur, why are we taking stuff out? The question is, why do we ever say anything beyond that on any other event? Okay? Good question. So things have been added, and things have been added, and things have been added, but we should know what the din is every time, what is to be left off, especially when we have a conflict. We're going to have a major conflict also this year. It's going to be Erev Pesach is Shabbos, right? So how are you going to get in your meals? So they'll tell you to go early, you daven early, have 2 meals in the morning before it's time to flush the chametz, right? Okay, so there's what to say about conflicting. The usual rules are overridden in these cases, right? Yeah. The last piece of Gemara we're going to see before we jump into the Halacha. We're turning the virtual daf. We're on Mem Vav Amud Aleph at this point. Okay? Where it says Mem Vav Amud Aleph in our source sheet. Rabbi Zera Chalash. Rabbi Zera felt weak. Nice way of saying maybe he was a little bit ill. Al Legabe Rabbi Abahu. Rabbi Abahu came to visit him. Kabil Alei, and he took upon himself, I mitpach katina charich shakeh. If this was this katina charich shakeh, or as Rashi says, kachayu korin Rabbi Zera. It means the little one with the burnt legs. Okay, fallen and hurt his legs or something when he was younger. Okay, so we're talking about Rabbi Zera. If he recovers, uh, it says in Bava Metzia, by the way, Rashi explains what happened to him. Avidna Yom Tava l'Rabbanon. I will make a party for the rabbis. Avidna Yom Tava means I'll make a feast. That's also how they describe what one is supposed to do when he finishes a Masechet. Avidna Yom Tava l'Rabbanon. Okay? And by the way, that's why it's important. I have a siyum to make. I learned this lesson. You finish a Masechta, you're learning a certain base medrash. The siyum shouldn't be for just people off the street. The siyum should specifically be for those who occupy themselves. They're always there in the base medrash. Share the meal with them. Okay? Avad Sudata L'chulu Rabbanon. So he made a su'udah, a meal, for all the rabbis. Himata L'mishrei. Then it came time to L'mishrei. What does L'mishrei mean? Well, in this case, it means take permission or to allow. That means, what is the allowance here? Saying the blessings. Why? Because if you do not say your blessing on the bread, you're technically not allowed to eat it like that, right? The matir of eating the bread is the blessing on the bread. Rashi says, Lishana de Sheruta. Okay? He says, it's language of Sherut, service. Lomar lifros birkata motzi l'leachol. He says it basically means saying the grace. What? The pre-eating blessing. Omar Leili Rabbi Zera, Lishrei Lon Mar. So he told Rabbi Zera, please, Master, say the blessing or permit us to do this. Omar Le, Lo Savar La Mar, Lahad Rabbi Yochanan. Does not my master hold of that which Rabbi Yochanan said? The Omar, Baal Habayit Botseah. How could you, Rabbi Abahu, honor me with this? You're the Baal Habayis. You're the one who has to actually break the bread. The one who breaks the bread is the one who recites the blessing. Shara lahu. So he said the blessing for them and he distributed the bread. Kibatu levaruche. When it came time to say the blessing, it was the after blessing. Amar le nivrich lon mar. Let the master say the blessing for us. Amar le. So Rav Zera responds to Rabbi Bahu. Lo savar lo mar laha de Rav Huna de min Bavel. Does not my master hold of what Rav Huna from Bavel? Rav Huna from Bavel? Who's Rav Huna from Bavel? Rashi explains. Hainu Rav Huna stama. Stam Rav Huna that we've heard about throughout the Talmud. Except this is in Eretz Yisrael. L'fishach shav hayah Rabbi Zera Eretz Yisrael, but makom Rabbi Abahu. Rabbi Zera's in Eretz Yisrael where Rabbi Abahu was. He was the big shot there. V'hayah lemi Bavel kamar hachi. So Rabbi Zera is referring to the sage who's back in Bavel, Rav Huna, who says Rav Huna of Bavel. Okay. Domar botzea mivarech. Now I can't say the grace for you because it also the rule is the botzea, the one who had said the blessing on the bread initially, is the one who's supposed to say the grace for everyone. So what was Rabbi Abahu's Havamina? Twice Rabbi Zera bested him. Rabbi Zera said, I can't say the blessing first because you're the host. And the host has to start this. And now because you, Mr. Host, said the first blessing on the bread, you're going to have to say the blessing after the whole meal. So what was Rabbi Abahu's Havamina here? Kiman Sviruleh. Whom was he holding? Kihad da Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishun Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Yeah, like Rabbi Yochanan, but in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Here it says Ben Yochai, like it does throughout the Talmud. Bar Yochai is in the Zohar and other later texts. Throughout the Talmud, it's Ben Yochai. Okay? Hebrew style name. Baal Habayis Botzeyah, the Oreach Mevarech. Yes, it's true the Baal Habayis, the host, he's the one who says the blessing on the bread to begin with, but it is the guest who says the grace afterwards. Why is that? Baal Habayis Botzeyah Kidei Sheyivtza Ba'ayin Yafeh. Yafa, sorry. The Baal Habayis is the one who says the blessing on the bread and actually breaks the bread, so that he'll give people, generously, with a good eye. Why is that? You wonder, so you just sit at a meal, how much is it actually giving you to eat? Right? How much bread is there to go around? So the Baal Habayis knows, so he'll be able to give everybody as much as he can. Oreach mivarech, kidei sheyivarech Baal Habayis. The Oreach is the one who says the grace for everybody, so that he can include a blessing for the host. What is it? My mevarech. What is this blessing? Yiratzon shelo yevosh bala bayith ba'olam hazeh velo yikolem la'olam haba. May it be God's will that this host shall not have any shame in this world and not be embarrassed in the next world. Okay? Well, what does that mean? Not shame, embarrassment. Why don't we say, Yehi ratzon shebal habayis yatzliach b'chol ma'aseh yadav losher v'chavod. Say it like a Sephardi. Okay? Good enough here. It means, like we say, that he should always be observing the commandments. Okay? He should observe the commandments in this world and enjoy the reward of the commandments in the next world. How do I know this? We ask God to teach us His Torah, the blessing before Kriyas Shema. That's what this is. That's what this is referencing. The Rabbi Mosif Badvarim. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi added to this prayer. He said, "V'yitzlach me'od b'chol nechasau." He should succeed in all his possessions. V'yunechasau, and they add unechasenu. So he's praying about himself. Also, in all our possessions, mutzlachimu krovim la'ir, successful and close to town. Wow, they should not have to have a commute. Yeah, it's someone who's very successful, so normally he might even have, let's say, a factory of some sort. He has flocks, he has livestock, he also has fields. So it would be much easier for him if he didn't have to go far and wide to take care of these things. And the Satan should have no power over his deeds or his whatever he's working on, and not over ours also. Certain versions of this blessing have been reincorporated into the Sidurim and the benchers. Sometimes they take out the whole prayer for oneself. You're just supposed to be blessing the host. V'yizdaker, you have yizdaker, yizdakek. What is it, a resh or a kuf after the kuf? Okay, so some have yizdakek. Lo lefanav, lo lefanenu, and it should not chance upon him, or upon us anyways. Shum devar hiru chet v'avera. Anything that involves unseemly thought, or iniquity, or sin, lavon. What's it between chet, avera, and avon? Okay. Chet means missing the mark. Avera means going over the boundaries. Avon means that a person is now liable for what he's done wrong. Me'atav yadalam, for now and forever. Now, this blessing, you look at, let's say, older benchers or the Shilo sitter from way back when, it didn't have this, right? Instead, they have a harachamon. You're already getting all these harachamons. Harachamon yivarech is balabayis hazeh, right? Now, I remember growing up, there was one rabbi who used to come by, and he was the one to say the grace. He would eat with my father, and he taught us a few things that back then weren't so clear. That there is a halachic opinion, the Gross specifically, that whenever you have a Zimmun, it's best to say it on a cup of wine. So he'd always ask for a cup of grape juice to say the grace for us. He'd always say it. And he'd say the whole thing out loud. So he taught us that really the Mizamein is supposed to say the entire grace out loud, as we can understand from all these sugyas. It's not enough, Baruch she'achanu shlot v'ocheinu, and then he says the first blessing out loud. Sometimes he doesn't even say that. Really, he should say the entire thing out loud. That's what we're talking about. And he would then say, right after Yichasrenu, nothing else except for this very blessing that we have in front of us here in the Gemara. And Art Scroll first came out, I think, about 40 years ago, right? You got your first edition. Some people still have that first edition Art Scroll Chumash, Art Scroll Siddur, right? So, kind of an interesting thing. I said it came down from Sinai. That's our official version of the Siddur, but it's only 40 years old. So, whatever, it's Tzarechiyim. But they said they put it back. This blessing has been missing from recent editions of the various Sidurim, so they put it back. Those in the know say this. So sometimes, this is a good thing. Things disappear from the Sidurim, and then they make their way back because the Talmud says they belong there. And a lot of other Sidurim in the modern era have put back that which should have been there all along, and taken out perhaps that which should not have been there. Okay, it's a whole science. How do we define what should and what should not? But usually they assume that which is explicit in the Talmud should be. There's very few prayers. You don't even have a Shmona Esrei, an official version of the Shmona Esrei in the Talmud, right? Where do we get our version of Shmona Esrei? So that's in the various Sidurim, like the Rabbeinu Sadia Gaon, the Ram Avno Gaon, right? Machzor Vitri and the Rambam Sidurim, which are all various. They all have certain similarities. That's when we know what the Shmona Esrei brachos are, the text. But Finami, perhaps there's a lot of leeway. They're digging up things nowadays that show that text used to be radically different. As long as you get to the point. But sometimes you actually have, here's exactly what should be said, and this is what people are saying now. Okay, we'll begin the halachas of the Rambam here, brachas, and see, we'll start comparing this with what we've seen in the Gemara, and perhaps we'll see maybe there's a little bit to argue here. This, everything here, Stam, is from Hilchos Brachos, and if I interject something from the Shulchan Aruch, it's marked as such. Okay? So now we're officially in the Rambam. Shtaim She'achalu. I'm surprised that they have two yuds in the word Shnayim. It almost looks like modern Hebrew. But I copied this from Machon Mamre, which is very reliable. But also they added yuds and vavs all over the place that perhaps the Rambam himself would not have had there. Two ate together. Kol echad ve'echad mevarech latzmo. Each one says the grace, the brachos for themselves, right? Good. V'imaya echad yodea ve'echad eino yodea. This corresponds to the case of the Gemara, the sofer and the boer. One knows and one does not know. Sometimes you have that. Zeh sheyodea mevarech b'kol ram. This one who knows says the blessing out loud. V'asheni oneh amen achar kol bracha u'bracha v'yatzai de chovato. He says amen after each blessing, and then he has discharged his obligation. Uven mevarech la'aviv. A son could say the blessing for his father. Le'eved mevarech le'rabo. An Eved Kanani, who has to keep kosher and has to keep all these commandments, he could say the grace for his master. U'isha mevarechet leva'ala. And a woman can say the blessing for her husband. V'yotzinyin yedei chovatan. And everybody discharges their obligation thus. Aval amru chachamim, tavo me'ira l'mi sheish tov anav mevarchin lo. The sages said, a pox should be upon he who has his wife or his children say the blessings for him. Why? When the sages gave this allowance, it was meant for someone who's maybe some sort of anus right now. But if he makes this permanent, so he's basically saying, I don't need to ever catch myself up on basic cheder learnings, graduate third grade. I have my wife, she'll be able to say the blessing for me each and every time. No, the sages expect of you to educate yourself. Even if you never made a siyum on Masechet brachos back in the day, now that you're retired, you should be finishing a Masechta about once every few weeks, because you have the time. You have to catch up. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. And if you haven't finished all 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch with the Pri Megadim, then you also have to get going on that. Okay? And in this case, you can't outsource the obligation to someone else. Is there anything else that needs to be said here? No, they discharge their obligation. Now, what? Yeah, who's equally obligated. Okay? If it's a child, why do you mention this? A child's not obligated technically, so he certainly cannot. The general rule about hotza'ah means that one discharging obligation for the other, it means someone who has an equal to or greater obligation. Okay? Yeah, that's true. So I remember one time I must have got a nasty flu a few years ago on Hanukkah, like right in the middle of the holiday, and I couldn't light the Hanukkah candles. I couldn't get out of bed. So that was the biggest surprise that I called my daughter around. She's already halakhically an adult. I said, I don't care. You were your mother. Go light the Hanukkah candles. I can't do it. Okay. So I don't know how it went. Eventually, I recovered. I went outside. They had a lot of light out there. I was able to say the bracha, Shas Nisim, on seeing them, but I couldn't do it on time. Okay? I wonder how it went. Yeah, sometimes it goes like that. Now, let's see. This is the last halacha before the break. This one is interesting because it's related, but Rashi didn't mention it, at least where we were looking. Shnayim mamtinim zeh lezeh b'ki'ara. Remember we said yafsiku. There, Rashi said, what? You have 3 people eating together, right? So what happens? One needs to go. He's going to have to wait for the other ones to bench. 2 need to go, so they're going to stop the third one from eating so that they could bench. Oops, I said benching. They could say the grace. Okay? Shnayim mamtim zeh lezeh b'ki'ara. Shlosha ein mamtinim. Here he says, if they're eating from the same plate, what are they talking about? Would people used to one plate in front of 2 men, they eat 2 forks, 2 knives, and get going, eating out of it? No, it didn't literally mean that. As a matter of fact, they used to eat on couches. And it means that there's one serving utensil, one big bowl of salad. I guess if that's what you eat, spaghetti and meatballs for both, from which both of them can take. So they're eating together. One stops, the other should stop also. Okay? They should eat equally. Shlosha ein mamtinim. If we are going, just because one stopped doesn't mean the other have to. Gamru me'em shtaim. If two finish eating, ashlishi mafsiki mahem. The third should stop. Gamar echad mehem. Ashnaim ein mafsikim lo. Ela ochlin vochin ad shegomrin. Here the Rambam says it's halacha not only refers to the grace, but also the derech eretz of how much food to actually eat. Okay, if you have someone, you have these two are eating, so they can't. The first one is welcome to stop, but he can't stop them. They won't stop. Save some more for me. They're going to just continue eating. I heard that royal protocol, let's say among blue-blooded, nose in the air European types, royals, is that when the monarch stops eating at the meal, everybody's got to stop. Right? King stops or queen stops, puts a fork down. That's it. No, I still have food on my plate. Too bad. Right? Is that true? Really? You've been there? Oh, that's what they say. Okay. You know, I haven't been to have tea with the queen yet, but I guess there are certain things. King. Does the king have tea? Current king? I don't know. Okay. So, sorry. We should read the next thing. Rambam also adds derech eretz here. Ein misichim basuda. What about no talking? Really, you're not supposed to have conversations at meals. Kind of difficult. The only reason why I had this guy come over is because I wanted to talk to him at my Shabbos meal. Now you're telling me what's the point, right? By the way, it's not considered having Shabbos guests. If you and your wife invite over another couple or whatever because you're friendly and they live down the block or whatever it is, or even they live a whole neighborhood away and you're having them for Shabbos, that's not the type of Hachnasas Orchim the sage is referring to. The sages were talking about Hachnasas Orchim means those who are needy and don't have. When you have your friends over for a Shabbos meal or whatever, that's Simcha Meireyus. That's just having fun. That's social fun, which is okay, but it's not necessarily a mitzvah. It's not like a laudable thing. But either way, the way the Rambam has it, based on the sages, you're not supposed to be talking. Kadesha lo yavo lidei sakana. They say maybe nowadays it's not so dangerous because we're sitting at the tables, European style, with chairs. In the olden days, they sat on these. Basically, they reclined on couches, like we know for Hanukkah, Pesach time. Look at this. Now they finally got some wine in the middle of the meal. Each one's going to say his own blessing on the wine. Why? With the bread, one man said the blessing on the bread and gave bread to everybody. So too with the wine, the host will pour everybody a glass of wine and say the bracha. That's how Kiddush works, right? That's before they're eating. We're so much against people talking while eating, even saying new brachas that are not necessarily part of the plan during the meal is dangerous. Let everybody stop on his own and say his own blessing. One should not be looking at the person eating. Eating was considered something, especially Maimonidean thought, as, let's say, animalistic. Okay? You're not so proud of it. The Rambam says, Talmid Chachamim does not eat in front of Amei Haaretz. Okay? Simply just doesn't eat in front of them. So a person doesn't eat in public. So too, a guy's eating, give him his, look away. Don't look at his face while he's eating. V'lo b'manato. Don't look at his portion. Don't start looking at his food. What do you got there? Okay? Sometimes that could be embarrassing. Sometimes the person doesn't have enough. Some people, children, what is a child's immediate reaction to seeing something? Wanting. Okay? Give me some of that. That's when a child does that, when a child looks and wants, that's lo sasave. And when the child requests it, that's aver of lo sakno. So it's one thing if a four-year-old says that, because a 4-year-old doesn't have a yetzer tov, hainu, frontal lobe, self-control. But if a grown person looks at something that someone has and wants dafka what they have, that's the isser of lo sasave. If a person sees someone have a hamburger or a nice car or even a nice wife or house, and he decides, I'm going to get one for myself, so maybe that's normal. But if he says, I dafka want what the other guy has, I want his hamburger or his car, his wife or his house, that's lo sasave. And if he actually enunciates it, okay, how much you want? I want to buy your car. That's, you have one of those Tesla thingies that everybody has now. I want to buy it off of you. He wasn't selling it. Maybe even if the guy says, you know what, I'll consider this deal because he offered him twice what it's worth, just the act of going to the guy and saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy from you." So that's not exactly right thing. That's the avera. Okay? So we should think a little bit sooner before we talk or what we do. Just looking at other people, what they have.